Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, YouTube, everywhere at Hawk Blogger. It is a triumphant Friday morning here in the Pacific Northwest as your Seattle Seahawks. They've done the thing. They've done the thing that we have been talking about, not just for this offseason, but for many, many years. In fact, they did something that they haven't done since some of you probably weren't even born. If you're under 23 years old, you haven't seen the Seahawks draft a guard in the first round of the draft. And that's what they did last night as Grey Zabel. Grey Zabel becomes your Seattle Seahawk newest offensive lineman. And the Seahawks didn't do anything crazy. They didn't do anything that will be hard to defend. They didn't outthink themselves, didn't trade back, despite the fact that it's pretty clear that John Schneider wanted to trade back. And one of the kind of side stories of this offseason has been perhaps other people helping the Seahawks along their path. And I'll explain that in a second. But as we've talked about a lot, you need a little bit of luck. You need a little bit of luck. Honestly, you need a lot of luck to become a great football team. And I think there might be some things that are a little lucky that have gone the Seahawks direction this offseason. We won't really know until the new season begins. Before I share about that and give you some more to talk about and think about, give the show a like, click subscribe. We are up over 18,000 subscribers. Thanks to all of you. Let's see how quickly we can get to 19 and 20. And man, we had so much fun last night. There was, I think, between 10 and 15,000 people watching our live stream last night as we reacted in real time to every single pick of the first round. And we're doing it again tonight. So the draft starts at 4:00 tonight. I'm going to get to the VMAC a little bit early. Who knows? Maybe I'll pull some people on if I can find some people there to join and have them as part of the conversation. But we'll be there for every pick tonight. Jeff Simmons, who had baby duty last night, will be on with us tonight. I think Evan Hill will make his first appearance on day 2 of a NFL draft for our live coverage. I think Derek Gebby will be there. Who knows who else will be there? So it is so much fun. I got to tell you, like, when we're reacting to the pick, the Seahawks pick, and we are all focused on basically my shared screen of the ESPN draft tracker announcing the pick. And I'm in the room in the VMAC in the media room. Well, this is the defensive coaching room, but it's now been made into the draft media room. And it's a big kind of cavernous room with dozens of people in there, from PR staff to reporters and all these professional folks. And they're watching, there's TVs everywhere and there's a big board. And I'm sitting there looking at the screen, and I think it was one of the times that we got it before it showed up in the room. And so I erupt, not like Evan. Nobody erupts like Evan, but I erupt. I'm like, yes, let's go. And all the eyes in the room, like, look at me. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm not supposed to do that in here, but I don't care. Like, this is an awesome moment as a Seahawks fan that John Schneider finally figured out that drafting an interior offensive lineman is going to be something he's going to have to do earlier than he wants to do it. And I give him credit. That's not meant as shade to John Schneider. That is, we'll talk about that a little bit in a second, but I love the player. I love the person. I love the fit. I I just I love the fact that there's gonna be people. There are always gonna be people that say, "Oh, man, this guy, he's a reach. He's he should have been a third-round pick." That's fine. You can believe that. There's no way Grey Zabel was gonna last outside the first round. Like, that was the market for him. And you can say he's a reach, he's a stretch, all those things, and say we should have gotten somebody else. Well, you know, Donovan Jackson's a guy that you can make the case would have been a safer pick depending on your perspective. I think Grey Zabel's a better fit for what the Seahawks are going to be running than Donovan Jackson, even though I really, really like Donovan Jackson. But the fact of the matter is, the Seahawks had Grey Zabel as the number one interior offensive lineman on their board. And instead of having to settle for number 2, number 3, or number 4 on their board, they got number 1 on their board. And I mean, if you have not listened to the conference call that we in the press had with him after he was drafted, my goodness, you got to listen. You got to listen. I had all these plans. I was going to share some of that sound with you in this show. I was going to share some of the John Schneider press and Mike McDonald press conference. But honestly, I was out until late. I got probably a couple hours of sleep, got my kid off to school, wrote my morning after column. Please go check that out at hawkblogger.com. Brand is Hawk Blogger. I barely write anymore. So hopefully people enjoy that rare thing. I do write my morning after each day of the draft. So I'll be writing each and every morning. And then got onto the show. So I've got a bunch of other stuff to do before I do the show later today. So I don't have the sound cut up, but I highly recommend you go listen to that. Sorry, texting with Josh Cashman. So I think my dominant reaction to what happened with the Seahawks yesterday is what I think Dana O'Gorman captured yesterday was just relief. There are so many things that they could have done that I would have understood, and I might not have wanted them to do, but I would have understood, and maybe could have even gotten excited about. There were things that they could have done that would have driven me crazy and were possible, and they didn't do those. They could have done something that nobody expected. The old school Seahawks, where they take somebody that everyone's like, wait, who? Wait, James Carpenter? What are you doing? Or Bruce Irvin? Like, what are you doing? Rashad Penny. You know, there's all these first round picks where people are just kind of like, okay. They didn't do any of those things. They made a logical, defensible decision on a player who is of high character, high work ethic, high athleticism, high fit. And if you want to be upset with that for some reason, if you want to be on the train of they're going to regret this was a terrible pick. And I see those, by the way. There are people that feel that way. You know what? To each his or her own. That's not how I feel about this. I am, maybe joyous is too strong of a word, but I'm pretty darn happy about the way this went. And part of what makes this great is I think this isn't just a celebration of Grey Zabel and his addition and how he's going to affect this team. I think it's a great sign for the partnership between John Schneider and Mike McDonald. I think it's a great sign, an indicator of the continued growth of John Schneider as a leader and as a GM. I don't think a year ago, John Schneider would have picked Grey Zabel in the same situation. John Schneider mentioned during this offseason that one of the adjustments that they were going to have to make was moving interior offensive linemen up a little higher on their draft boards. I think last year, a formative moment was when the Seahawks wanted to get Cooper Beebe and an interior offensive lineman in the 3rd round, and they were trying like crazy to trade up to get Cooper Beebe, and they could not do it. And they were upset about it. And they ended up settling for Christian Haynes. And while that still can work out to be a good pick, I think that solidified for John Schneider that, man, I am not going to put myself in that position again. We've got to adjust. The market for these kinds of players may not be what I think it should be, but that's what the market is. And so we have to pay market prices for that talent. And he said, when I asked him earlier this week, are there any other positions that you move up artificially on your draft board other than interior offensive line? And it's like quarterback. Those are the only 2 positions. And so that is a tangible change over the last year from how John Schneider's approached the draft. Give the guy credit for that. We can hammer him all we want for decisions that he has or has not made regarding the offensive line over time or the draft over time. But he has really, I think, made a ton of very wise changes to his draft strategy. And if you look at the last 3 drafts in the 1st round, you're talking about Charles Cross. You're talking about Devin Witherspoon and Jackson Smith and Jigba. You're talking about a lot of why. Now you're talking and Byron Murphy. And now you're talking about Grey Zabel. It used to be that the 1st round was a place where Seahawks fans covered their eyes. They're like, oh God, what's he going to do? Why can't he just do the normal thing? And now he's just doing it. He's doing it. And isn't it a nice feeling to wake up the day after the 1st round and be like, all right, okay, the world didn't end. The sky did not fall. And that's not random. And I see people trying to say Jody Allen has forced him to do this or that. Like, I don't understand why there's this weird subculture out there about like that has all these theories about ownership and how this has changed that. Guys, like John Schneider's talked, like he's actively, if you've listened, he's actively talked about what's changed and their self-scouting and what they've done over time. And did ownership have some impact? Of course, ownership has impact because they're giving him feedback. They're listening to his thought process and challenging him on things. That happens. But the lengths that people will go to avoid giving John Schneider any credit for becoming better at his job, for creating a culture where he's got someone like Mike McDonald. He's got guys like Matt Berry. He's got guys in there that are going to speak up, tell him what he thinks. Trent Kirshner, that are influencing his decisions and making his decisions better, more informed, more defensible. And so I'm happy about that. And the fact of the matter is, if he had traded back and missed out on these guys, if he had made another selection, I'd be having a different conversation with y'all this morning. I would be hypercritical about it. But I look at it and my interpretation, I asked John last night, like, hey, there was a report. I think Ian Rappaport said that the Seahawks had trade offers that they declined in order to stick and pick and take Grey Zabel. Is that accurate? John said, no, it's not accurate. And he said, literally, I texted this to somebody, so I want to make sure I read it exactly. He says, they're not accurate. We were discussing it and things did not come to fruition. And my interpretation of that, and as John was looking at me delivering it, was, yeah, we wanted to move back, but those guys wouldn't do the deal. And so we were stuck. And I don't think John was happy about it. And that's part of the luck of how this worked out. If there was a team that was willing to trade up, we could be having a very different conversation this morning about who the Seahawks got in the first round and whether that was a good thing. And the other part of this is maybe John would have taken a lesser deal if he didn't have Mike Macdonald in the room over the last year and few months advocating for how important the interior offensive line was. Maybe John Schneider would have gone a different direction if Mike Macdonald didn't hire Clint Kubiak, who hired John Benton and Rick Dennison and these other folks who know what they want with interior offensive linemen and this zone blocking scheme and how important it is. I think all of those things had to happen in order for the Seahawks to get where they are with this pick. If Mike Macdonald had not chosen to go to Mobile, Alabama with John Schneider, one of the only coaches there, to watch practices, and if you remember, John Boyle reported about this, Mike Macdonald at the Senior Bowl gave a position-by-position report to John Schneider and the entire scouting department, personnel department that was in attendance at the Senior Bowl of every position, every strength, every weakness, where things stood. And that was something that they said was pretty unique and something they hadn't really had before. And then he was walking the grounds, walking the field with John Schneider, watching the offensive linemen, watching Grey Zabel. If you look at the morning after column I wrote, I even have a little video in there and some pictures of those guys from those moments. If Grey Zabel hadn't been in this class, if he hadn't performed the way he did in Mobile, who's to say that the Seahawks would have made this selection that they did, whether it's Grey Zabel or another offensive lineman? I think he was such a clear fit for what they're trying to do. And I put in the column as well some of my notes from the first 1v1 passing drills when I was watching. I didn't know Grey Zabel that well. I knew his name. I knew he was one of the players to observe, but I was watching each one of those reps and I'm writing in my notes who's doing what. And I've done that for years when I watch 1v1s, and it is rare for me to be able to write for the same guy. Okay, he won. He stoned that guy. And that's what happened with Grey Zabel in that instance. And so I think you're seeing the Seahawks identity start to coalesce a little bit more. I asked Mike Macdonald multiple times throughout last season about whether he believes the interior offensive line, how important it is, and the offensive line in general, how important it is. And it's very clear in Mike Macdonald's mind how important all that is. Mike Macdonald is a guy that has made his reputation on excelling in the middle of the field. Kyle Hamilton at safety. Roquan Smith, inside linebacker. Matabuike, defensive tackle. Like, up the middle. Up the middle is where Mike Macdonald has made his money. And he also understands how the interior offensive line plays a massive role in either making it easier or harder on those defenders. And he also wants to be a team that can run the ball and impose their will and go for it on fourth down and win short yardage. Interior offensive line matters quite a bit in those situations. When Hugh Millen yesterday asked Grey Zabel on the conference call, what is your favorite call that you hear coming in from the sidelines? And he said, A-gap power. That is I like moving a guy from one spot to another. Awesome answer. Exactly what you want to hear. And while there's going to be so much talk from me and from others about how great of an athlete that Grey Zabel is, and that one of his real advantages is how quick he is and how he's able to fit in an outside zone scheme. The fact that he comes from a offense where, as he has talked about it, their definition of an RPO is run, power, often. That he wants to physically dominate the guy across from him. He's an old school. He's a throwback in that sense on the offensive line. He's a finisher. And so now you've got John Benton, the offensive line coach, Rick Dennison. I think they call him Rico. You've got Justin Outen. You've got all these guys aligned on this guy that they've brought in. And as of now, he's a guard. And I think he'll probably stay a guard. I think that they like Olu Oluwatimi. I think they like Jalen Sundell at center. I'm not sure they're going to go and draft one today, but we'll see. But now you've got this pretty credible addition to your offensive line. And I'll say this now. I'll say this throughout the lead up to the season. Just because I'm excited about Grey Zabel, I think this is a good pick, and I think it's the right pick. If you've been watching this show for a while, you know what I've told you. Rookie offensive linemen are rarely great. It's usually a couple of years before rookie offensive linemen really hit. And honestly, that's part of why I was really advocating for them to get a veteran and not to just add a rookie. Like, I don't think the expectation should be that Grey Zabel comes in here and is a Pro Bowl guard in his rookie season, or even an above average NFL guard in his rookie season. I don't know that that's a fair expectation, given there's a lot of players that have come in and just not been that early on. I do think that the expectation should be that he's a starter. And I think that's good news. I think that now you've got him and Satawa Lamea and Anthony Bradford and Christian Haynes who can battle it out at the guard spot. May the best men win. And the better men you have, the better that battle will be. So I think the Seahawks really were fortunate in some ways to have a player like Grey Zabel fall. Daniel Jeremiah had him going at number 11 to the 49ers in the last version of his mock draft. The 49ers run the same kind of offense that the Seahawks are going to run. Steve Weish on NFL Network said his lock of the night was Grey Zabel going to the Miami Dolphins, who run a similar style of offense to the Seahawks and have offensive line needs. He didn't go either of those places. He didn't go to the Cardinals. He didn't go to the Bengals, who also have interior offensive line needs. And Tyler Booker going to the Cowboys, you heard John Schneider talk about that they got a little uncomfortable when Tyler Booker went, because that could have triggered a run on those guards. But you also heard John Schneider, if you listen to what he did and didn't say, he was pretty clear that Grey Zabel was the top interior offensive lineman on this board. He said that multiple times. That means Tyler Booker was not. He also said that without saying anything about Booker, when asked about the comparison of the two players, what he chose to say about Grey Zabel is how good of an athlete he was. The obvious implication there is, and we know Tyler Booker did not score well as an athlete. That doesn't mean that they didn't like Booker. I think they liked Tyler Booker a lot. I just don't know that they liked him a lot for their board and for their scheme and at that point in the draft. So a lot of things kind of had to work in the Seahawks' favor for Grey Zabel to be available at 18. And the way the draft fell, they got their pick of interior offensive linemen. And they got the top guy. So I think that's going to be something that sets them up now for the rest of this draft beautifully. Because if we look, the Seahawks now have they have 4 picks today as it stands. But what I think we all, if you're listening, John Schneider was made it pretty clear there's some guys that they really liked, and the impression I got was guys that they thought would go in the first round that are still available, and that they want to move around. I think they're going to try to move up today. I think they're going to try to move up, and there's a couple of teams to keep an eye on in that regard. So the Browns have 2 of the first 4 picks in the second round. The Bears have 2 of the first 9 picks in the second round. So could the Seahawks try to move up from 50 to 41 or 39, one of the Bears picks? I think they could. Are they going to move all the way up to 36 where the Browns have a pick? Maybe. But the Seahawks have the ammunition to move up from 50 to one of like the top 10 picks in this that are in this second round. And if you look at some of the names of the guys that are still available, Will Johnson, the cornerback, was a top 10, top 5 pick in some cases before he had injury concerns that have kind of moved him down the board. Mike McDonald knows him well. Mike Green, edge rusher. I don't know that he's a great fit for the Seahawks, but was commonly mocked in the first round, has some significant character issues, off-field issues that have come up for him. Nick Emenwari, who we talked about a lot, the safety. Is he a guy that they go up for? I don't know that Donovan Ezeraku is a guy that they go up for, but they have drafted edge rushers in multiple second rounds, Boye Mafe and Derek Hall. Wouldn't be shocked if they do feel positively about him. There's guys like Darius Alexander. There's receivers. There's tight ends. Elijah Arroyo, Mason Taylor. Receivers Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, Luther Burden. Like there's a lot of interesting. Carson Schwessinger, the linebacker. So, maybe it's a quarterback. I don't think they're going to move up for a quarterback. Maybe they will. Shedeur Sanders ends up falling out of the first round. Not sorry to see it. And I just don't think, I won't go on about Shedeur Sanders. I'm on record about why I think he's not as good of a prospect as everyone made him out to be. But, there's some interesting names. And there's also some interesting offensive linemen still left. Jared Wilson, the center. Jonah Savaiinaya, who can play guard. I think that's a great fit for him. Tate Ratledge, guard. Marcus Bowe, guard center. Miles Frazier, guard. Any of those guys could end up being day 2 picks. On the defensive tackle side, where they've got some need, Alfred Collins, is that a guy they want to go get? Maybe Omar Norman Lott. I certainly would be happy if they called his name. So there's some dudes out there to be had. And I expect the Seahawks to kind of go up and try to get somebody. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to find somebody who wants to do business with them. And if they stick at 50, I'm not sure. Again, that might end up being the best thing for them. But my God, I mean, obviously they're not drafting for me. But if you told me that they're going to come out with Grey Zabel and Nick Emenwari from this draft class, I'd be pretty damn excited. Like, really excited. And there's some pretty exciting, Mason Taylor, another name that if they come out with Mason Taylor as well, I'd be very excited. So today's going to be fun. It is going to be a lot of fun. I cannot wait for tonight. I hope you all have liked, subscribed, Click the bell to get notified when we go live because it's going to be a ton of fun. A ton of fun. Let me get to some of these super chats because I know all of you are dying to get your voices heard as well. And Christian Fuerte, who's been a member for 8 months, says, all caps, Zabel, LFG, get Jalen Noel today. That would be fun. That would be fun. No arguments there. Love Jalen Noel. Ed Chan, who's been a member for 8 months, says, listened back to the whole stream this morning while working today. Really fun show. Praying for Benjamin Morrison, the cornerback, to fall to us today. That's an interesting one. Haven't heard that as much. And he's corner's definitely a position of need. The Cats in the Hats. I love Zabel, but what was your read on the John Schneider at the press conference? He didn't seem thrilled, maybe even anxious. He didn't get more picks for day 2. Well, I think you're right. I don't think that was about Grey Zabel. I think the way I'll tell you a few things about John Schneider, and I wrote about this in the morning after column on hawkblogger.com. One, he absolutely wanted to trade back. There's just no question. And he didn't leave that open to interpretation. He wanted to trade back. They couldn't get it done. Now, if you know that's the case, that indicates that they didn't feel like the player that they were going to take at 18 was a better value than moving back and taking some other player while getting additional picks. That's the reality. If they didn't, if he was happy about it, then, and if he had said to me, yes, we did turn down trades, that would have indicated that they do feel like Grey Zabel was a guy they weren't going to trade back for. They've said in the past, Devin Witherspoon was one of the guys at 5 that if he was available, they were not going to trade back. So I don't think that while John Schneider was clear that Grey Zabel is the number 1 guy on their interior offensive line board, I don't think that means he believes Grey Zabel warranted the 18th overall pick. I think the other thing I have kind of interpreted about John Schneider over the years, if you connect all the moves about when he's excited, when he's not, the man is a bargain hunter. He is the guy that wants every move he makes to be fiscally responsible and a good deal. That shows up in free agency. That shows up in negotiations for extensions. That shows up in draft picks. And maybe the only place I don't think it shows up is in some of the trades he makes for veterans, where he does not get, quote, good deals or bargains. But I think he feels very responsible spending other people's money. I think there's a chivalry kind of nobility to kind of the way he thinks about that. And then there's also, I just think the guy doesn't like to be taken. And I think that's I don't think they had Zabel as worth the 18th pick, and understand what I already said before, what he said, that they've moved interior offensive line up. They bumped it up. That means he probably, to start with, Zabel was probably like a 2nd round grade for them. And for what it's worth, I think that's the right level for him. I was talking to Rob Rang about this last night. We both agree. Like Grey Zabel, Donovan Jackson, those are like 2nd round talents, not mid-1st round talents. And so you've got a general manager who wants to get a bargain, who is already forcing himself to bump a player up a round, which means you're going to have to take a player who your actual grade is a full round lower. You're going to have to take him over players that are still available that you think are potentially worth taking at 18. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's players that John Schneider wanted to take at 18 that they didn't because they knew they needed to get the interior offensive line who are still available. That's my read of what his energy was about moving up. And he's like, I got to stop myself. I almost said, like, I think there's guys that they would have potentially taken at 18 that are still out there. And I think they're going to try to go up and get one of those guys. And so what it comes down to is I think John Schneider feels like he ate his vegetables last night, did what he had to do, doesn't feel like he maximized that 18th pick. I think he would have felt like he had maximized the value if he had moved back, added more picks, and got an interior offensive lineman that he still felt good about. Maybe. But Donovan Jackson went just a few picks later, and if Jackson and Zabel were both gone, I believe the Seahawks would have regretted that. I'll go as far as to say that might have ended up costing them their jobs. Not because a general manager would say, hey, you should have done this, but the risk associated there with the other interior offensive linemen and how long it would have taken them to be real contributors, or if they ever got to be real contributors, I'm just not sure there would have been enough time for this organization to get behind it. So I ended up thinking this is really for the best for the Seahawks, even if John Schneider, is probably critical of himself and wishing that he could have gotten more out of it. Matthew McManus says, do you think the Rams traded out because they were going to draft Dart? Who are your ideal picks at 50 and 52? Yeah, so the Giants traded up ahead of the Rams and grabbed Dart. Why would the Giants trade up? Because they thought or believed that someone was going to take him before they got there. You generally trade up ahead of the team, often right ahead. Like, you don't want to, if you thought you could have traded up just a couple of spots to get Dart, then you would do that because it takes less comp to do it. You trade up to the point where just past the team that you think is going to take the player, so that you spend the minimum amount of draft compensation to move up there. So I think the indication is, and the implication is, yes, they believe the Rams were going to take Jackson Dart. That's further evidenced by the fact that the Rams then traded out of their pick after the Giants moved up and took Dart. So, yeah, I do think that's probably the case. And it'll be interesting to find out. A lot of people are lauding the Rams move. I think getting a first-round pick next year is great, but they moved down a long way. They went from 26 to, where are they now? My goodness. 26 to, oh, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong round. To 46. So they moved down 20 spots. They basically traded a first round this year for a first round next year, is the way I see it. Now, I know they also got a second round pick this year out of it, but when you move down 20 spots and then you get a first rounder, I mean, they got it from a Falcons team that I think could honestly make the playoffs this season. So that first round pick could be similar to where the Rams picked this year. Now, it'll probably be more valuable, like a better draft maybe next year. But it's not like they got the Giants first round pick or the Browns first round pick or the Titans first round pick. So personally, I think it's a crazy trade that the Falcons did this. They moved up that far. I don't think it's quite the steal that for the Rams that everybody else seems to think. But yeah, that's my kind of read of it. So the second part of this, who's your ideal picks at 50 and 52? I mean, my ideal right now is honestly that they move up and they get like Nick Emenwari. That would be ideal to me. Or Mason Taylor. If you get those two guys, my God, amazing. I think Alfred Collins would be, I'm not as high on Alfred Collins as I was on Tyleik Williams, but Tyleik Williams went in the first round. That's just the reality. There are some other A-gap defensive tackles, nose tackles that I really like. I like Omar Norman-Lott a lot. No pun intended. I love Jalen Noel. Jalen Noel, as much as I love him as a receiver, I'm not positive that he's not truly your X receiver, and I think you really need an X. So Jack Besh is a guy that I really love and would love to hear his name called. There's a lot of, I mean, Elijah Arroyo is an interesting name. There's a lot of guys that I'd be pretty excited about. So I don't want them to collapse too many of their picks to move up, but there's a few guys I'd be for it. I'd be for it if they did it. So I can't wait to see what they do. Jackson Knight has been a member for 12 months, man, a full year. Love it. Says Grey Zabel is a Seahawk. It's a beautiful thing. Nothing more to note. Go Hawks. Well, thanks, Jackson. Appreciate you, man. Super Sauce XL has been also a member for 12 months. These vets. I love these folks that are around for a year. It says awesome to see John Schneider change his attitude towards interior offensive line. I agree. Hawks fan Matt Man, who's been around for at least that long, says, any chance you can wield your power to get the Seahawks to actually mic the reporters during the press conference? You know, it's an impromptu, it's like it's an impromptu kind of setup in this room. There's not the normal audio equipment that they have available to them here. All the reporters are dropping mics down there. So I'm not going to be a squeaky wheel. I'll tell you that much, but I understand the frustration. I've been in your position many a year. And, you know, if you have questions about what the question was, you can try to ask me. And when I can, I'll try to respond. But, yeah, I understand it was a little frustrating to hear that or not hear that yesterday. Crumpled Zinc, member for 2 months. Well, happy 2-month anniversary, man. It says, go Hawks. Well, go Hawks back at you. DJ Jerry Nice says, agreed about moving up. Are you a Howard guy? And then Zabel, all caps. I assume you mean Will Howard, the quarterback. If you meant someone else, let me know. I'm not a Will Howard guy. I think he's a career backup. I have zero interest in Will Howard, like 0. I'd be more interested in Riley Leonard. At least he has some mobility to add to the plates. I'd be more interested in Tyler Shuck, although, you know, I'm not a huge Tyler Shuck guy. I'd even be more interested in Jalen Milroe. I think he's a bad fit for what the Seahawks are running, but at least has some elite traits that, you know, you take later on, fine. Honestly, once you draft Grey Zabel, I can be talked into a lot. But Will Howard's not one of those things. Jack, who has been a member for 2 months. Happy anniversary, Jack. He says, go Hawks. Yep, go Hawks, dude. Appreciate you. And Jacob Moon has gifted 10 Hawk Blogger memberships. You know what to do, folks. If you want to get one of these free Hawk Blogger memberships, like the show, subscribe, watch the show, share the show. All those things help YouTube decide whether you get to be one of the people that gets a free membership. So thank you for all those super chats. If you have not used code HawkBlogger lately at jkboots.com, now's the time. I mean, the best boots you will ever own. You use code HawkBlogger, you get $75 off. It is a crazy deal. I don't know how long they're going to continue supporting this deal, but we agreed to it. So $75 off, and they will give $15 for every boot sold to the Wildland Firefighters Foundation, which helps supply our Northwest Forest firefighters with gear, supplies, everything they need to keep our forests and themselves safe. So do yourself a favor, do the Northwest Forest a favor, use code HawkBlogger, get yourself some great boots. I love my JK boots and highly recommend you get some as well to enjoy them for yourself. So, all right. Let's do a quick recap of where I think things are going to go from here, or at least some names to keep an eye on. Let's talk about 30 visit players that have not been selected that the Seahawks have met with. All right. Nick Emenwari, they had a combine visit and a 30 visit. Savion Williams, the wide receiver / running back, they had a 30 visit as well. Tyler Shuck could be a day 2 pick, had a 30 visit. Savon Ravel Jr., the cornerback, would be a great pickup. He had a 30 visit. Mason Taylor, they met with him at the Senior Bowl. They had a 30 visit with him. Jalen Milroe, 30 visit Senior Bowl. Jared Wilson, 30 visit Combine. And Jared Wilson glowed about meeting with Steve Hutchinson the same way Grey Zabel did. Ty Robinson, maybe a day 2 guy. They had a 30 visit and he was at the Senior Bowl. Kyle Williams, wide receiver from Washington State, 30 visit Senior Bowl. Will Johnson, cornerback, I already mentioned, 30 visit. All those guys are still available. As far as guys they met with at the Combine that are still available, Tate Ratledge, Jonah Savainaya, Azariah Thomas, the cornerback, Terrence Ferguson, the tight end, Cam Williams, offensive tackle, Jalen Knoll, who they met with at the Senior Bowl and the Combine, all available. I will also say I know from a source that they had multiple meetings with Omar Norman Lott. Those were over Zoom. So a lot of names that have been linked to the Seahawks still available. I'll note that Jack Besh is a guy that they met with at the Senior Bowl. They meet with everybody at the Senior Bowl. So Olufemi Oladejo, they also met with at the Senior Bowl and is an edge player, that really interesting guy. So a lot of names, a lot of excitement coming your way. I will be back with you all later today. I'm not exactly sure what time I will be with you, but I will be with you. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. Keep an eye out for the show, and we will have a lot to talk about when we get there. Until then, go to hawkblogger.com, check out the article I wrote there the morning after, and have a great rest of your day. I will see you all very soon.